Meanwhile, world leaders are also very closely watching as Poland faced this suspected Russian drone incursion this week. President Trump announced this morning that he is ready to impose major sanctions on Russia when all NATO members get on board. We have retired U.S. Air Force Lieutenant General Mark Wetherington with us right now. Sir, thank you. Our gratitude to you for your time this morning. A pretty significant announcement here from the president, who posted on Truth Social regarding sanctions. But what he says is, I am ready to do major sanctions on Russia when all NATO nations have agreed, and started to do the same thing when all NATO nations stop buying oil from Russia. Your thoughts on how he is calling out NATO in this moment?
Well, Molly, thanks for having me. And I think this is a very significant moment for NATO. It's clear that more needs to be done to shore up the defense, and many of the nations have been moving that direction. We've seen very, very positive progress from the Secretary General, Mark Rutte, as well as from the Supreme Allied Commander, and we've seen NATO nations stepping up to the plate to try to make a difference. But still, much more must be done to counter Russian activity, such as this very reckless and deliberate incursion into Polish airspace.
Which brings us to our next topic here, how swiftly NATO nations did respond to this drone incursion. They showed that, they were ready. So it's interesting how it's being addressed, though. The President Trump, said the incursion this week could have been a mistake. However, the conservative president in Poland has been very clear, relatively new to office, but posting on social media that this was nothing more than an attempt to test our capabilities and response. Your thoughts on how intentional this was?
Yes, Molly, it appears to me that it was very deliberate, given the scale of the incursion and given the consistent flight paths of those vehicles. It appears that it was a deliberate act, whether that was to probe Polish airspace and understand the NATO response, whether that was to gain an advantage, an operational advantage in their fight against Ukraine, remains to be seen. But I do believe it was deliberate.
I want to talk a little bit more about NATO's response before we move on. Since the negotiations began, with Putin traveling to Alaska just very, very recently, the attacks on Ukraine have also grown tremendously, and the deaths and the attacks not only on really on the local people as well as infrastructure. Your thoughts on what appears to be a ramp up right now, even as these peace negotiations and the pressure is also ramping up?
Well, it's been very clear since 2014 that Putin and the Russian Federation does not respect Ukraine as a sovereign, independent nation. They've demonstrated that on multiple occasions, and it's clear that this is a tough fight, and they're very much stepping up the pressure. And it's a very difficult ongoing fight for Ukraine, and hopefully it will not expand beyond that to our NATO neighbors.
Yeah, switching gears between Israel and Hamas now, I want to fit this in. The Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, traveling to Israel this week after this Israeli strike in Qatar that escalated tensions in the region. What do you want to see come from this visit from the Secretary of State? And also, what do you make of that recent attack by Israel in Qatar on Hamas leadership?
Well, this was clearly a very opportunistic strike, and it was also, in my opinion, very high risk. There appears to be some internal dissent among leaders in Israel as to the benefit of undertaking this strike at this time. It's clear in the aftermath it did not achieve its intended objectives. And I think there will be broader regional consequences when it comes to the momentum that was sustained from the Abraham Accords and diplomatic recognition of Israel and the collaboration and cooperation they will need to continue to advance their security objectives. So in that view, it was also somewhat reckless.
Yeah. All eyes on Marco Rubio's visit this week could be very significant. We're always watching these developments. Thank you, Lieutenant General Mark Wetherington. We greatly appreciate your thoughts this morning.